Raising Vibrations community. This is Simon, and welcome to another astrology update. And this is for the 25th of October 2020. And as you can see over there, I've written the words wounds, meaning, and self-direction. And I think this speaks pretty deeply to the nature of the astrology chart at the moment. And I think something that we can carry forward with us going past this date and, well into 2021 as well. Okay, so let's take a dive into the astrology chart for ourselves over there. Let's just see something. Okay. So as you can see today, the sun is sitting at 2 degrees of Scorpio, and it's making a conjunction to Mercury, which is in retrograde form. Okay. I'm kind of feeling in a very teacher type of mode today, so I'm going to share a little bit about just how you work with an evolutionary astrology, giving some extra astrological tips for any of you that are also learning at the same time. So as you can see, that's an R that defines retrograde. And if you have a look with the Mercury and the Sun, there's Mercury and the Sun, and they are in a conjunction. That's what a conjunction looks like. Okay. So we've got a conjunction taking place with these symbols here. And you can also see the Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto council, as it were, sitting there in Capricorn. We all know this. 20 degrees now, Jupiter, 22 degrees Pluto, 25 degrees Saturn. And they are trining the Venus in Virgo aspect. So you can see there's the trine there. It's the blue aspects. And if you come to the little graph over here, you can see Venus is making a trine to Jupiter, trine to Saturn, and then all the way the trine to Pluto. And just a quick recap in terms of looking at the chart. Let's see if I can actually access that. There we go. There, you see the 6 and then S. That means that Venus is 6 degrees of separation with Jupiter, meaning that there's Jupiter at 20, there's Venus at 26. Venus has moved 6 degrees past the 20 mark, so therefore it's a 6 degree separating aspect. It's significant because the aspect between Venus and Jupiter in the chart, this would be called a disseminating trine. Okay, disseminating trine. And what it really represents or says to us is that we're taking values, Venus, and we are trying to align and integrate those values into a already established structure. Okay. And so Venus here, 26 degrees within Jupiter, we are trying to synthesize and trying to merge together our values, Venus, and our needs, and the way that we, how we inwardly connect to ourselves and what we value. Each of us has individual needs with individual values. So with that disseminating trine to Venus and Jupiter, we are assimilating our values into a philosophical structure, a perspective that we use to, in a sense, navigate our world life experience. We have an outlook on life, and that outlook on life is what navigates us. We use it to help us answer the questions in life. So somebody who is deeply invested into Eastern mysticism would use and see reality through one aspect, whereas somebody that has been living primarily in a Western culture and feels that life is about individuation at a very deep level, they're going to use that terminology, that philosophical overlay, that perspective to answer the questions that they have about life. So this is Jupiter's function. And Venus's role within the context of Jupiter is the way that we value a specific philosophy or truth. So we're in a period where we are synthesizing, right? We are attempting to synthesize our core values into a philosophical structure, and that philosophical structure is then part of where we are as a collective. Right? And the reason why I say part of a collective is because of the Capricorn energy. Right, this is society overall, and society's direction, society's philosophy. But what you will actually experience with this aspect that I think is very clear, and that's why I labeled one of the words for this conversation today as meaning, because each and every single one of us right now is doing that individually for themselves, right? So you're trying to establish or connect with a core value, a core set of needs that you consider to be something that really reflects your inner truth, right? That would be what I would say is occurring for us individually at the moment. We're synthesizing, we're trying to find that collaboration between meeting our needs in an independent way that's really authentic and real for us, and how that correlates to our philosophical structure, and then how that then becomes integrated into the collective's perceptions and truths, and that will, like I said, we're going to have a lot of conflict with this aspect as well, even though it's a trine, and mainly because when we individually interact with a collective truth, at some point there's a transition from our needs being met individually to a governmental structure or overarching structure that can't actually accommodate every single person's values. It's not possible. So there's an aspect of surrender that needs to take place between external structures and internal structures. So I think this conflict, in my opinion, is actually pushing an incredibly interesting tension between the need for security in an external situation and the realization that if you want to be individual in your sense, and you want to individuate from a collective value structure, then it requires to turn inward and to live and be guided by those internal principles. It's a very small switch that takes place in terms of perspective, but it has a tremendous effect, or a monumental it does. It has a tremendous effect on the way that you actually then navigate your life, because while you are concerned about external structures and their roles that they play, it doesn't actually affect you as much in that sense. So that aspect's pretty interesting to me, to be honest, because it definitely is revealing the tension between individuals with a specific value structure trying to interact with a collective value structure, and there is no personal relation between the two. You can't actually walk up to somebody in the government and say, hey, I don't like the way you do this, and so therefore I want you to change it right now. Or if you feel that this, like, I can actually change, and I think I should, to give us a little bit more perspective here. I'm thinking about companies and organizations, right? This is not exclusive to governmental structures. This can be organizations that have a specific value structure, and you have a different value structure to that, and say you want to interact with it. It's like there's a impersonal relation from the corporation to you. You're just a person that, say, is purchasing something from their production line, as an example. It doesn't have to be that specific, but you get the point I'm trying to make here. There's always an interplay, but from one side, one is very subjective and personal, and the other side is very impersonal, and that tension will show up, I think, in different ways, whether it be in your relationship, whether it be where you're actually involved in some of these types of examples that I've given you, or it can simply just be something along the lines of, you know what, I don't actually value that anymore. I don't see the purpose or meaning in that direction, or that attachment anymore. I think the word attachment's really good here, to be honest, because of the fact that Mercury and Pluto, Mercury and the Sun in Scorpio in opposition to Uranus in Taurus is about attachments. So the next phase of what I want to layer for us over here is this conjunction that you saw there, or that you see there, and that opposition. So Uranus and Taurus, the planet that's actually ruling the Uranus archetype in this case is Venus. So Venus is actually influencing Taurus. And the reason why that's the case, or you ask me why, because the planetary ruler of the Taurus archetype is Venus. So this Uranian impulse, this Uranian energy, as it were, is being funneled through the Venus archetype. Okay, so we would have a dynamic tension of trying to not conform or follow the same path within that Venus. So Venus trining Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn, although it's in Earth signs, it's very linear and more forward moving, and it's very practical in its nature. Uranus is actually saying, yeah, but the tone that I want to give that energy is more of a, where do I feel stuck? Where do I feel like I'm needing to create revolution? Where do I feel that there needs to be some deconditioning, or breaking out of, stepping outside of the mold? Tone to it, right? The essence of it. So that's why I'm saying that while it is a trine, I think that there's some frustration that can be held with that Venus trining that Pluto for all of us, because we feel stuck in some way and we want to move forward with something. And when we're moving forward with something, we actually feel liberation. We feel like there's something changing for us or something refreshing occurring. And it's the Mercury Sun conjunction that actually, in my view, speaks specifically to how that process takes place. And it's about attachment. The attachment to the meaning behind your value structure or the past. It can be the attachment to your security around it, So that would be something I would consider investing some time into, is reflecting on the nature of your current attachments at the moment. And, do those attachments transform you? Do they bring you evolutionary experiences that are progressive and empower you? Or are they ones that you can feel are very out of place, disjointed, feeling dislocated with it, not feeling empowered in the experience, and you're holding on to it for some reason? So that's something I think is important to note. And like I said, that conjunction over there, they're going to cross each other over the next day, right? So Mercury Sun is going to consistently bring through some subtle but very profound messages from the Uranian field, right? Mercury is the lower octave of Uranus. So Uranus is the sort of far-term memory of something, right? What you did last week, what you did the week before. And Mercury would be how we connect to that space in the moment, right? So there's a message or messages coming from the unconscious, coming from the Uranian realm, that is linked with your value structure, that has to do with your philosophy, and how this all correlates to self-direction. Correlates to, how are you navigating your personal life? And I think for me personally, if I had to talk a little bit about how I see these energies showing up for myself with that trine over there, and maybe this is something that you all feel on a collective level in some way. I'm curious, let me know. But this trine that's showing up here, and this Mars retrograde, as you can see there, squaring these energies, right? So you've got Mars retrograde on one side, squaring it, okay, and then you've got Venus on the other side of it, trining it. Now, again, this Mars retrograde is in a crisis in action aspect. So we're dealing with the necessary energy to move forward, but the awareness of the unknown and the lack of feedback, environmental feedback, that gives a sense of, hey, by the way, you're going in the right direction kind of thing, or you're experiencing something that is progressive. So one side you've got that, and then the other side you've got this energy that wants to like transform, and while it's transforming, it's also wanting to assimilate, right? Assimilation means to find to feel the experience of interconnectedness, right? To move into something, to gel together. So gelling together and initiation of new direction. That's a really interesting kind of combination of energies at the moment, to be honest. And I wonder if that contributes a lot to the current Neptune square the nodes, right? So Neptune's sitting here at 18 degrees and the nodes sitting at 21 and 21, as you can see there. Venus has been squaring the nodes. It is still in a square to the nodes aspect. So really there is a lot of activity on the nodal axis. And I'm thinking that this kind of combination of Mars retrograde wanting to move forward but with a little bit of uncertainty, and with Venus saying, yes, let's assimilate, let's kind of be progressive in our way of being, but I want to do it in an individual way, creates this dynamic, this tension, the seesaw effect of moving forward and then feeling that philosophical structure or philosophical overlay really gives meaning to you. And then you have an experience that kind of doesn't really give you something that's out of confidence or a feeling of moving forward, or you're uncertain about how it shows up, whatever. And then we kind of regress back to the old philosophical structure, right? And we bounce back between these two states where we're feeling a little bit kind of nauseous between, how do I move forward with this? How do I be consistent with this? Again, this is what I've noticed. This is what I've seen as in one area of our experiences. Of course, there's a multitude of other ways that this can show up for people, but this seems to be something that's general, and it's my sense of how these planetary archetypes will show up in the collective for us. So there's a kind of seesawing effect that's taking place. My interpretation of it from the point of view of energy and evolution and what I think it can represent for us is, in order for you to be present in this physical realm, you need a physical body, and that physical body comes with the molecular structure that is your brain, that is your senses, that is your perception of the world, that is your environment, right? And if you are exposed to a specific experience of reality, right, and we all have this, right, this would be called the South Node, or the upbringing, specific way of seeing things, then you're going to develop a sense of reality, a sense of life that is like that. You're going to be attached to that. You're going to feel security in the consistent, in the known. And now you have a bunch of energies that kind of are pushing a new narrative, pushing a new description, pushing a new way of being, and your physical senses and body has not been exposed to that experience consistently. Now, there's that dynamic tension between feeling secure in the old but feeling limited in it, and wanting to embrace the new but feeling uncertain, right? So there is a seesawing effect that's going on that I can see, in which the disillusion of the ego attachment of the past is occurring. So when I say disillusion, I mean that it's decaying, right? This is Neptune and Pisces, Neptune, it's the archetype of decay. You can think of this in the sense that when you cut a tree down, that's Pluto, elimination, right? The tree no longer is now living. You've terminated its existence, Pluto. And then if, for instance, it just sort of gets left in the forest, as an example, it decays. That's Neptune. It returns to the source of the energy, right? So over time, very slowly, it decays, and it houses an entirely new ecosystem for another form of life. So what I'm referring to here is that we are in a state of decay on one side regarding something that no longer has meaning in it, and we are in an embracing state in which we know that the forward movement is something that is life-affirming and that has self-direction, and we feel that this is something that feeds us with deep sense of existence. And we're just kind of in a stage at the moment where we're just seesawing between the old and the new, right? And eventually at some point it just becomes more weighted towards the new, and we move out of this phase. So that's what I sense and feel for us individually in our individual stories. Okay. Where does the wounding come from? Well, it's interesting where this shows up, and I think, with Chiron sitting here again, sitting 6 degrees Aries retrograde. Now, it doesn't actually show it in this chart, but there is an aspect between the Sun and Mercury has been in conjuncting Chiron. I think Mercury was at 4 degrees yesterday. The Sun will move across and will actually aspect the Chiron. And I think that the wounding part over here is an important aspect of this journey that I feel needs space and time in our lives. Okay, so let me be more direct and more specific. In order to move forward with this new phase of life, you have to regress back to the parts of you that didn't get the attention or the love or the acceptance or the feeling of inclusiveness, right? You need to go back to that space, and you need to work through where those emotions became displaced in some way, shape, or form, right? And this is not something along the lines of, I'm talking about where every single one of us in some way, shape, or form through the collective conditioning of the past have not been exposed to what healthy boundaries look like. And so you struggle with saying yes all the time and feeling that, you can't direct your life because you're saying yes. You're falling into a type of people-pleasing type of state, and you're feeling frustrated because you want to initiate something, but you feel stuck in this part of yourself that is afraid to say no for fear of rejection. Okay, that would be one aspect. You get another aspect where it's the opposite, where in order to protect yourself from any forms of vulnerability, you shut down or close down and said, I can do it myself, right? There are two sides to this experience. Both of them are rooted in a wound that none of us can avoid. It's unavoidable, right? And so because it's unavoidable in that sense, it's important and healthy to say, hey, this is like to turn inward and say, okay, this is where I can be very sensitive to an experience. This is where I'm seeing that I might have created a fantasy world around this part of my view of life because it's a protection mechanism. That basically. And I think it's really, really important to check in with those protection mechanisms that are put in place, those feelings of where your body tenses up in an experience, and really explore them and really kind of work through them. Because when Jupiter and Saturn do enter Aquarius, and as we move along this Earth timeline, it's going to become more and more important to feel that you can manage life when things start to become more frayed at the edges, more uncomfortable, more lack of security from external saviors or external authority figures that say this is the direction. Or you need to be able to know that you can self-direct. And if that's lacking, then you will be trading your security, your freedom in some way, shape, or form, or your sense of autonomy for security. And it's something worth to consider because, again, healthy relationships for you will feel almost in a distance. Being able to relate to people in a very positive way, or when I say positive way, I mean in a way where there's connection, also comes along with this Chiron in Aries at the moment. So to end off this little sort of abstract blurb of whatever I just shared right now around this, Chiron moving through Aries is healing the experience or sewing into our reality what Uranus showed us between 2012 and 2018, which was that we have been living under a time in which there have been rules, regulations, paradigms of thinking that weren't really inclusive, that weren't really balanced in ways. So there was a lot of experiences that that marginalized us in some way, shape, or form. And so that material is in the surface in everybody in different ways and forms. And so it is not necessarily to focus on the victimization of the experience, but to work on the healing process or the reintegration process of the effects psychologically and emotionally that came along with that type of experience. And so that it permeates the capacity for leadership through the heart. And we see humanity in a different light. We don't see it through the wound of that was unfair and now I need to go and balance the scales by creating the same wound in other people. Trauma doesn't, you can't heal somebody else with your trauma. You have to heal yourself in some way, shape, or form, and then kind of reflect what that looks like in a way that inspires somebody else to consider seeing a large part of their life, because life is traumatizing and we're all traumatized in some way, shape, or form. And so we do need to regulate and take back the displaced emotional complexes that we have. And it's a tough journey, and it doesn't have to take up your whole entire life, but it is something that Chiron through Aries is really, really, really advocating for us at this moment in time. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents on what I think contributes a tremendous amount to aligning with meaning, because meaning out of your healing process becomes something that is authentic and real. In other words, there's a genuine empathy that's rooted in that process of healing yourself. You can see the sadness and suffering in other people, and you show up in a way that reflects the potential to heal from those states or to recover from those states. So that would be an example of what I'm talking about here. Self-direction is also reclaiming personal space and boundaries, which through the past cultural conditioning wasn't something that you were allowed to have, because that rooted in rejection. If you said to somebody no, and people didn't know how to deal with rejection, they would become emotionally dysregulated. And so it's about really recovering the capacity to say no. That's also what Chiron's saying. Because no is a healthy thing. It says, hey, this is my boundary. The other person says no, and then you can actually start to negotiate your needs in ways that are supportive and healthy. Okay. So I'm going to leave you guys with 2 things today. One is from Brené Brown, and it says, vulnerability sounds like truth and feels like courage, right? It sounds like truth. This is the Sag South Node trining Mars in Aries, and it feels like courage, right? And vulnerability is stepping outside of the comfort zone of what you are knowing and allowing yourself to experience the truth of your existence. And it will show up as courage in your life. It will show up as the capacity to not fear life, ultimately, but to realize that life is transformative, and it does bring us closer to actually feeling that we are alive when we're stepping into allowing ourselves to be more transparent and more seen when we're expressing and aligning with people who are that can reflect and resonate with you, because you're being truthful and honest about your experience of life and your experience of what you're dealing with. So truth and courage aren't always comfortable, but they're never a weakness. It's kind of, the sun's message in Scorpio, right? Scorpio's highest vibration is the capacity to recognize your own vulnerability, but still stay with that, even if you feel that you need to build up 1,000 walls around you to protect yourself. Because vulnerability really lies between the Scorpio archetype and the Pisces archetype, right? Because Pisces is 360 degrees and Scorpio is death. So death could come from behind you, right? Because you can only look 180 degrees. So the reason why vulnerability actually is associated with Scorpio in the context of classic astrology is just because it's revenge with Scorpio. But really, it's the natural trine between Scorpio and Pisces that speaks, and the combination between openness, known boundary, Pisces, and the experience of life and death held in Scorpio. Okay, so that's that. That's my sharing today, my quotes around the astrology at the moment. And then I just wanted to say one more thing to every one of you. Another person who I think is worth listening to, but I'm not entirely sure if it's something that will probably meet everybody's taste buds. But I like this work by the name, or by this person called Jocko Willink, and it's called Extreme Ownership. And I love it so much because what it does when he talks about extreme ownership, it's like owning your life. This is this Venus trine Capricorn. It's like owning your existence, like fully stepping into your truth and owning it with incredible courage, and allowing your vulnerability to be the thing that drives you to deeper layers of self-understanding. And it's through extreme ownership. It's extreme ownership of your life. It's extreme ownership of your wounds. It's extreme ownership of the way that you define meaning in your life. It's about applying extreme ownership to everything and taking charge, like literally taking charge and saying, this is my experience, this is my life, this is my situation, and I own it. I own everything about it. It belongs to me. And by doing that, you gift yourself the space of actually then taking charge of the things that you really want to do with your life, and to move forward with that, and to live your truth, as opposed to wanting it to happen or hoping it, or for the astrology to have a trine, etc. It's like, no, start today by sinking deep into one thing that you can say, I'm going to take extreme ownership of that experience, right? Whatever that might be. It doesn't have to be something dramatic. It can literally just be something as silly as, I'm going to own looking after my teeth. And so I'm going to brush my teeth 3 times a day, or I'm going to whatever, like I'm going to acknowledge the amount of sugar I take in. And this is important to me. This is what feels right for me. And I'm going to own that experience. And I'm not going to blame that person or blame this person or blame that person. I'm going to take charge of it. That's also Scorpio. It's really confronting the core of your being and being deeply vulnerable with yourself, and not being angry or scared or uncomfortable with yourself, but really being right there at the core of your essence and saying, I'm going to own what it's like to live my truth, and I'm going to do it with full courage. I'm going to show up in the best possible way that I am. So that's what I'll leave with you today. Have an amazing couple of days, peeps, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.